Greetings. I'm Christopher Burgess, the host, and for this second episode of Conversations from the Inside, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Deanna Caputo, Chief Scientist for Insider Threat Research and Solutions and Senior Principal Behavioral Psychologist at the MITRE Corporation, and the recent recipient of the Insider Risk Practitioner of the Year Award. The community of insiders presented this to her in April. Congratulations, Deanna, and welcome to Conversations from the Inside.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about the psychology and insider risk management. And one of the questions that keeps coming up over and over again is, can human behavior and psychology be used to predict whether an insider, our colleagues, might turn into a threat?
Yes, and I think it's an excellent question and a good discussion point.
It's awfully broad.
Yeah. Can psychology solve world problems? I think psychologists wish that was the case, but psychology cannot successfully predict exactly what an individual human will do next. We can anticipate group behavior much better, but what people are asking for is essentially Minority Report, which is a fictional Hollywood movie. It's not a documentary, and that's important for people to really understand, because it's a double-edged sword.
You can't set up systems where an employee walks into the place of business after he badges in. The system does a behavior check and then flashes red lights if he's having a bad day.
Yes, that I don't even think anybody wants that, though, right? We want to be able to anticipate when we have risks, and we want to be able to get ahead of those risks. I understand the need for that, but it isn't ethical to try to predict someone, because you could be wrong, right? If we can't accurately predict, we shouldn't be trying to do that at all, because there are really consequences to being wrong, as you know well, Chris, right? If we, move forward,
well,
we can change.
There are consequences to being wrong. As we shared in our personal discussions back in the Hansen investigation. I found myself in the middle of the confirmatory bias of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who was convinced that Hansen was at the CIA. And when you're wrongfully accused, it can mess up your life. Not only does it take you out of the sequence, if you will, on career progression that all of us have experienced, but when you put a stop on that, it's hard to recover. I did, but not all my colleagues who were in the same Venn diagram as I was did. And so, is this a clinical issue or not?
I think it makes us feel better to believe that the people that leak information or disclose to foreign governments or do sabotage, that there's something wrong with them that can be fixed. I think that it makes us feel better that it can't just happen to anybody at any time, but that isn't the reality. This is not a clinical problem. The people that we engage with in insider threat programs, I know the leaders know this, are people, a lot of them are good people. They got in the wrong situation and they made bad decisions. I think the exception to the clinical question are violence threat assessment teams. There's definitely a critical clinical component to harm to self and harm to other, but all the other areas of insider threat really aren't clinical. They're good people, perhaps in bad environments or bad situations, but what they really do is just make a bad decision. And getting out of that decision is the part that people forget, right? It was one decision that got them in. Getting out is difficult.
It's kind of like when you fib to your parents, how do you back out of that one, right? They're going to know in the end because you don't have an escape. You have to show up the next day. So information protection is different than espionage and leaking information. Though I've dealt with a lot of folks on both sides of the espionage coin, as you can imagine. And for many, it was ideological. And for many others, it was just plain business. I'm taking the risk. If I get caught, so what? I'll go away. That was Aldrich Ames. It was, he viewed himself smarter than everybody and tried to show it every day. I mean, I knew the man. And then when afterwards they said, well, do you have any remorse? He goes, no, it's just business. I had something to sell. I sold it. I got caught. I didn't think I'd get caught. End of subject. So why is it contentious?
I think it's contentious because we want answers quickly. And I think that psychologists are really interested in people and we want to be able to anticipate their behavior. And so it makes us comfortable there. But that really isn't where we have the greatest impact. I think that it's a little contentious about when we start talking about personality and measuring those interpersonal things. Measuring ideology is different than trying to measure like who somebody is and assume that something about that inherently makes it that they will do something bad.
So that's a great segue to, should we have for or against profiling? The arguments for say, yeah, we should profile individuals, but can you imagine profiling all your colleagues? Or against it, on the other hand, there has to be triggers or signs that we can look for.
Well, I think there's a difference in personality profiling and triggers and signs, right? So let's start with the profiling and then we can talk about patterns and behavior. But there is no significant data demonstrating that a certain personality type or even a personality disorder explains insider threat activities. Even the Project Slammer data set had 45 convicted spies. They were 14-hour interviews, and each spy completed a whole battery of validated personality measures, and there was nothing significant, which tells you that there's not going to be the easy button.
No, they each had their own boat that floated.
Right. And I'm not saying we all have features of our personality, but I think what we were looking for is a disorder, something we could measure so that we don't hire people like that, or we can identify that quickly. And although, nobody likes null findings, it's really important to check our assumptions with data. And so when and if data were to arrive that demonstrated that, we could reconsider that. But the extra challenge is, what is the reality of measuring personality? Are we going to have everyone fill out a personality measure and not hire people?
Every executive retreat has people fill out this battery. I'm an INTJ. This is how you communicate with me. This is how I communicate with others. Does it have a role? I mean,
well, Myers-Briggs is not a personality test, and it isn't actually a validated test at all. It has the great benefit of reminding us that we're all different. So it's good for those team events.
What I'm getting at is everywhere you turn, people are looking for crutches that will allow them to fast forward to success or to avoid a train wreck in the case of the insider threat becoming a reality.
Sure. What we want is patterns and behavior. right?
Ah,
So we
okay.
want to know, are there patterns through the past bad insiders that can help us anticipate risk, not threat though. And we do find patterns of behavior, but they aren't about personality. And could those behaviors be driven somewhere underneath? But I really encourage programs to focus less on the internal motivation of the person and focus on the behavior that you're going to see, right? What is it going to look like to you in your program, the colleagues, their online behavior? Trying to get out the root cause is not something you can measure. So it really is the behaviors that manifests that should be where our attention and risk management is, because that's what we can look at, right? We're not
So
able to
what
look
is
inside
he
people.
or she doing, and how does that measure up against the greater corpus, if you will? And then you take all this corpi and you say, okay, in this industry, this is what's normal. In this industry, that's what's normal. But a person moving from industry sector A to industry sector B may be an alien at first because they do things differently. In my
Sure.
experience, for example, in security awareness training, I found that talking to software engineers, hardware engineers, was different than talking to accountants, HR, logistics, people who dealt with people as opposed to people who dealt with technology. I had to put my thoughts together differently. I had to present them differently. And one wanted it to be nice and soft and elongated, and the other one just wanted to give it to me, hit me in the nose with it, tell me what you want from me, and move on. So, are those the type of profilings we should be doing? Is the this is what we consider to be a norm. This is what we consider to be abnormal behavior, or behavior that warrants an inspection for. And let me give you an example in fairness, and that is, it's well known through the entire insider threat industry, the last 90 days of somebody's employment is when they are most likely to pilfer. Okay, that's somebody who's leaving and taking stuff with them. But the espionage side, they're not going anywhere. They're staying there forever. So how would we detect them if they don't leave their swim lane?
So a lot of times we're looking for one of two things, like subtle changes within their behavior. Most insider risk programs now have the benefit this is where technology has its advantage, right? Insider threat is not cyber only or even cyber first. But when we're talking about patterns and behavior, we're able to see, right, how you do your work and how that either subtly changes over time, which can be, or those dramatic changes. But like you said, you could have a new role, right, in that organization. So there will be that dramatic shift, right, as you
Sure.
adapt. But you can see that. So maybe the risk will flag, but analysts know to look for what those contextual things mean, right? A new role, something has changed. I think we want to flag risky behaviors and we want to then look around at other data sources to determine whether there really is something that could be potentially concerning. And then what we do is we either try to support if we see something that there is to support to keep that employee on the right track, to help them kind of weather life that might be happening to them,
Sure.
or we just keep watching,
Well,
right? And I don't
I can
mean
tell you from
watching in a
personal
big brother
experience.
icky way.
I was on the
Yeah,
verge of burnout, and a manager said, you're at the risk of making bad decisions,
right.
and we're burning you out. So I'm mandating you're taking the rest of the week off. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And here's the employee assistance program, and they're standing by to assist you. And it truly was a game changer. So I think that it's absolutely important that you don't just finger folks saying, this behavior is abnormal, or this behavior is unacceptable, or this behavior is odd, because all of those happen. But you also come in with, and this is how we might be able to assist you, which is my
Well,
segue to
that's
the role of
mitigation.
HR. I, I, I
Yep.
think
But even
HR has a
before
huge
HR,
role.
I think HR has a huge role. Before we go into HR,
Oh,
though,
please.
I think you said something that's really important that has not to do with HR inside.
No.
It's being a colleague, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're a supervisor or a leader,
No, see
it's
something, say
no,
something.
it's noticing that someone's having a tough time
Yeah.
and saying, "Are you okay?" And is there anything I can do to help? And those words, even though all the time, most of the time people say, I'm fine.
Yep.
And no, thank you for offering, but I don't need any help. The fact that you asked already has a mitigating effect. Even though we know they're most likely going to say no, they heard, they know that you noticed, and they know that you care.
Oh yeah.
Even though
I said no,
isn't
and
anything.
I was informed it wasn't a question.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you
And if
see,
it's that, if
is
it's that
caring.
clear,
That is
yes.
caring. This individual absolutely cared about the mission, cared about the individual, wanted both to succeed, and both did succeed, and realized that the urgency I was bringing to it was overboard. We're getting it done, but
Right.
we don't need it done tonight. Tomorrow, the next day will be fine. And from my perspective, it taught me a great lesson, which is try to give individuals parameters around what you expect from them so they know how much rubber to put on the road.
Exactly. And so, with people, I say a lot in almost every place I talk that people are the missing link, right? They're not the weakest link.
No.
But HR is a key part of that. HR has a really incredible partnering and balancing opportunity role in insider risk should they accept the mission. And I find that a lot of HR specialists they don't get as much training on the difficult conversations and interpersonal conflict facilitation as they used to. They're, how do I function with Workday? How do I do all these logistical reporting? But they have the ability to make insider threat like a protective activity where instead of scrutiny, we're trying to figure out what we can do to support and help, like you said, or offer just flexibility. And I don't just mean hybrid work environments, but like you said, flexibility on when some things due. Is it really due? And is there a consequence if it's late? Sometimes there is, and you should be clear. And sometimes there isn't. And you should give people that breathing room if there's the breathing room. And I think we forget because we're just all moving so fast. And then, with HR, the greatest mistake I see with insider risk programs in HR is that they're asking for too much information or the wrong information. We don't, even the EAP example you gave, if someone were to be using a EAP, it's valuable to know that they're leveraging it. It doesn't actually matter why they're there. You don't need to know what service they're using to know that they need support. And that's
somebody has let's talk about the cleared world, right? If somebody has a financial crisis, that's putting their security clearance at risk. And thus, if they go to their facility security officer and say, I am having a financial crisis, I am going to the EAP. They have put me in touch with financial counselors. This is my doing my duty, self-reporting that I have this going on. If for whatever reason it percolates up in an investigation downstream and somebody says, oh gosh, look at this, he's had a bankruptcy, we've got to pull his clearance. The reality is, if you go through all the stages, you've increased the odds of your retaining it because you've been responsible and an adult. There are so many people with clearances, again, who go into financial crisis because of personal health issues. Their child has cancer and they're now $600,000 in debt. You're going to pull a rocket scientist off the rocket program because he's caring for his child and he knows he's in debt and he's self-reported? No, you're not. But it absolutely creates a vulnerability. And this is where I think HR has the ability to get between the hard spot, which is, sorry, we can't use your services anymore, and keep this valued employee, as opposed to letting someone go because life got hard on them because they might be a threat to us.
Correct. I think the struggle that HR specialists and leaders have is that they don't know what you don't do with the data that an insider risk program collects. So I find that one of the key stakeholder engagements is to share with them what you're not doing with the data that you have. You are not sitting around reading everyone's emails. You simply don't have the time. Even if you could, you don't have the time. There are not enough analysts to be
Sure.
over evaluating people. Those data points are there for when something alerts, so that you have that context. And when we talk to HR about that, we find that once they hear it out loud, they're like, oh, but in an absence of information, we are humans and our minds make things up. So to them,
So we want to analyze behaviors. What data should organizations be collecting?
well, they should be looking out for risk factors that we are identifying. And obviously, there are some interpersonal, like stressors, but they should be looking for positive stressors. This is a great
Yeah,
conversation.
if somebody throws a coffee cup through the window, that's that's an obvious sign. But what if somebody's padding their accounting?
Sure. And that's when we start watching, right? So the goal isn't to run right in as you experience and assume intent. The goal should be go in. Most of the time, risk programs are trying to show that there isn't risk. They spend most of their time explaining why you saw an odd behavior, but also if you see inappropriate behaviors, padding accounts, but being in debt, like you talked about, is not necessarily a risk factor. A lot of people have debt. What we should be looking for is when people are overwhelmed by the debt, not by what's happening, or they're worried, right? When people are worried about something, they're open to recruitment. That is what our adversaries are looking for. They're looking for people who are worried about something, and they're going to swoop in and they're going to ease your worry, right? They're going to fix
And
it
to
for
keep the
you.
analogy that I used previously in my prior world of information collection, I was always looking for what floated a boat. And then I would build the boat because
Sure.
That's what gives. But the data is it I'm thinking it's there, but that these cross-functional teams that make up the insider risk, if you will, executive council in a company, if such exists, and I encourage every company to have that it has to include finance, so you know whether or not somebody is timely in their submissions of accounting. You have to have HR. You have to have the technical side, so you see what they're doing. Who else do we need to have there, and what data might we get from them?
Well, I think we're still evaluating the quality and the usefulness of some data sources, and I encourage the insider risk community to keep doing that. Make sure there is good information in that data and not assume that. So I think you talked about HR. I think travel data has proven to be important. During the pandemic, that mattered less, but it does matter where people are going, why they're going there. And what you're looking for is people not being honest, right? Doing things that are not truthful. Right? They're not telling you that they, have a financial issue. They're not telling you why they're going on that travel. And so data sources that are still up for question are things like social media. So we have done some evaluation, and getting good stuff out of social media has been a struggle for risk detection. If you're doing an investigation, it's a different discussion about data. Once you're under investigation, we want as much information about you as we can. When we're looking at risks and trying to alert on things, for example, social media is really challenging. People obfuscate who they are, and they inflate on purpose. Like a dramatic response is what social media is all about.
Yeah.
And so we should not assume that is your actual behavior. And I think we know that. But I think I get asked constantly about social media data being invasive. I don't think it's about invasive. I honestly do believe that people put that, if it's public, they know it's public. That reasonable expectation of privacy is gone when you put something on a public website. However, I'm not sure that what they're putting out is really helping insider risk programs to deal with. So at this point, collecting that proactively is more risk than benefit to a program.
So if an employee who works for Acme Inc. Puts out on their social network site of their choice, I hate my employer. I've got the lousiest boss. I just do this for the paycheck because I got 2 kids. To me, if I am a competitor, if I am a nation state who might be interested in what Acme Inc. does, I might dig a little deeper into John or Jennifer Jones, and what kind are they having consistently bad days, or is it just one? But what I'm getting at is social network monitoring. I don't think is surveillance. I think it's prudent. So to
I think
anything that mentions your company, you should be listening. And if you have employees that are denigrating your company, that should be a flag. Do you agree?
But there's a difference.
I led the witness. I understand.
There's a difference, though. Like, and you made it in your statement. There's a difference between monitoring for discussions of your organization on social media and monitoring for the list of every single one of your employees on social media.
Absolutely.
Those are not the same thing. What you're arguing is, and you should, right? You're monitoring for people monitor on the dark web, right? You're looking for your IP out there and discussions about your org. That is very different than monitoring for individual employees. And flight risk, you're likely going to see it on your network as well. People don't just do things in one world. We are very fluid. We leak, right?
Well, I don't know any company that has a centralized database where you should keep your CV so we can see you go in and update it, right? And so, but that's what people do when they go, they do it at two times. They do it when they get a new job. They go in and update it immediately. July 2023, I'm now doing this. But then they also go in and update it right before they want to share it. So do you monitor CVs?
I think most programs do. It's looking under what we call flight risk. We are looking for employees that are job hunting on your work network and system. If you're doing that at work, then you are giving that information to your employer.
That 100-watt light bulb we thought we'd hired is really only 15 watts because they're using their employee network to look for their next job, or employer's network to look for their next job. So we want to leverage the behavioral sciences. This is how you get to eat. What are the do's and the don'ts? Where can we absolutely be doing the right thing, and doing the right thing not only morally but ethically? And where are the lines where, if we go dive in without a specific investigation to support, where there's probable cause to have been, the bar is met, whatever the bar is. Every company has a different one, but they open an investigation on John Jones, poor John Jones. I pick on him all the time. And okay, now we're going to look at this. The FBI did it. They said, they created a Venn diagram, and the CIA said, yeah, Christopher Burgess, he's got a lot of those filled. So let's go look at him. And think about it. 17 polygraphs, over 100 interviews, 9 months on ice. Tell me whose life doesn't go upside down. So what are the do's and don'ts there?
I think the best use, and obviously I'm biased by the work that we try to focus on, the thing we bring to the community, is leveraging the behavioral sciences to find patterns in behavior, not to be looking at the data as if like this individual is going to pop out. But we have enough insiders now to start being able to look for patterns in data, just like we do for fraud and serial killers. Like, we're not trying to invasively investigate. We're trying to find risk factors that alert, and then do a lot of due diligence before you even engage anywhere near an employee's employment, right? Where we're doing all of that background work to be confident that there is a risk, and we're managing that risk while we're doing that. But labeling people is the biggest risk for behavioral science value, right? Labeling people by personality, and especially when you're not qualified to do that, labeling people like clinical risks, right? Or they're depressed. I hear that a lot. Like, that's not your job to assess, and you aren't qualified to do that. So all the assumptions about people, you should be looking for evidence, right? A data point of behavior.
Thank you for saying that. I believe this as evidence by this. And if you can't say that sentence, then you shouldn't be fingering someone and saying this is the individual that is putting our information at risk, or this is the information, the individual who may put our information at risk. If I may pause you for a moment, we got a comment here from Paul Temple. And it's rather lengthy, but I'm going to jump to the end, Paul, and we'll come back to you in Q&A. But he says, our approach should be future tense as opposed to past and present tense. But I submit perhaps it has to be both, because I always say your future tense is, this is real time, this is what I see. And then your past tense, your investigation, is your Wayback Machine. It's you're rebuilding to create that evidence you need to make that hard decision. Do I keep? Do I not? Do I call law enforcement?
I think past matters, right? I think a fundamental, principle in psychology is that, past behavior is the better indicator of future behavior. So I'll disagree that we don't look back.
Oh, we do look back. We have to. That's how we form your patterns.
Have to. Yeah, I think that how you address that past behavior, how that employee responds to you addressing that, also gives you an indication of whether you should have future concerns. And so I think we are looking forward. We're not assuming that you can't change. People change a lot in the good as well. So if we're going to assume that people can change and start doing bad things, don't forget to assume that people that are on the fence or having a tough time, they can change and just be better. And so we need to be looking forward as well and giving that opportunity. That's what we should. We need our employees. We've invested. They're people. They're such an asset. So we have to be very conscientious of that. But past is important, and data and behaviors that are critical looking back as well. But how far back? That is a different question. How far back do you look? Are we talking about vetting now? And, how far back do we look for indicators of drug use or, DUIs and behaviors that show maybe some poor decision making? That is a big question that we're still exploring. I think.
How many people do you know that made the best decisions in the world at age 20 and might make a different decision at age 50?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Age matters a lot. Actually, maturity is the right way to think about that, right?
Exactly.
The development of the brain and life experiences. As we go on, our decisions can get better, or they are better informed, right? So when we're making them later, they're more informed than we were, when we were 20 and we made bad choices. Those shouldn't hang on us forever, unless they're violent crimes. And then obviously we're having a different discussion then.
So as we're looking at training our managers, training our senior managers and our executives, in the larger multinational corporation, you may be dealing across hundreds of ethnicities and cultures. How do we train our managers to think about behaviors? And I'm purposely taking the cyber and the data that's associated with opening the door, closing the door, opening your laptop, closing the laptop. Not to say that those are not behavioral, right? If Joe Blow shows up in China and isn't supposed to be in China, that's a behavior we should earmark. But how can we train our lower level managers all the way up to our executives to think about behavior?
So we've spent a good time trying to figure out how to make supervisors and leaders more comfortable noticing. A lot of times, I think they're even afraid to notice, right? They hide and they don't want to notice that something's wrong or off, because then they feel they have to obligation to do something about it. I think we want to train them to see when employees are not a fit for the role or environment they're in, when there's like a disconnect between work style even, and they're struggling. And I think we also want to train supervisors to really recognize unique stressors in different roles. And I give an example often about bench scientists who they build pharma drugs, and you release the drugs into the common market, and those scientists have taken a lot of risk and they are overwhelmed. And we need to support our employees when they're overwhelmed. But supervisors are the ones that see that. So we need to both make it comfortable for them to notice, but we need to arm them with the kinds of things to notice, which is when employees are overwhelmed, even overwhelmed by something that seemingly is good, right? A lot of visibility. Maybe they're a person that's overwhelmed by visibility, public presentations, but you have to notice. So, and it's personal in the sense that these are all people, but it's going to be unique by person, and that's why you're a leader. It's not just about job performance, right? It's about person performance. Are they chronically starting to show signs that they're not taking care of themselves, right, and their overall well-being? And so supervisors are a key piece. I think the thing they also need to understand is that's not what's going to make someone lose their job, right?
No.
Or be put under investigation. That is a tipping point to going and looking at those other data sources. So supervisors are not a go getcha. They're not a final, they are one data point in a pool of data that tells us whether there's truly a risk. And if they really understood that better and didn't feel like they were making a choice about someone's livelihood, they would be a lot more comfortable sharing the things that they notice.
Sure.
Because they do notice things.
And, in every engagement that I've had, and on both sides of the table where people have been offering something to me or I've been offering something to someone else, we talk about the total compensation package. How often do we talk about the total employment package? The total of your life working at Acme Inc. and what should it be? And how should we look at? And if you're having a rough day and we see it, do not be offended. We're going to step up because we're investing in you just like you're investing in us. How hard is that to say to someone? I found that once I did that, it was really easy to go to a person and say, this position is not well suited for you. Here's why. I want you to think about it and come and talk to me. And then you have the conversation. And generally speaking, if you've started that, they go, well, maybe I'm not, right? But you shouldn't be saying that willy-nilly. You should have your data lined up there. Well, we're about to jump into Q&A. So what I'd like to do is briefly make sure folks know that you're with MITRE Corporation, and there is a framework on the technical side of insider threat and insider risk, and that's the Insider Threat Framework Initiative. And links to that and my write-up on it will be available down below. And then the Insider R Protect, which is your shop, assessment services and collaborative research program. Would you take a few minutes and tell us about that program, how people can participate, who is allowed to participate, who's not, and what are the benefits that come out of it?
Well, I think so. Those are two different initiatives. So the Insider Threat Framework Initiative is our work as well. And the goal, and it is not just cyber. So we are collecting data. So for those out there, and many of you are already providing data to the Framework Initiative, this is a team effort, but we're putting together thousands of insider threat case files, the actual raw data, and we're going to derive those patterns. We're going to make them substantial. And so we need more contributions, and we'll be looking at cyber, we'll be looking at physical, we'll be looking at those individual characteristics and organizational characteristics. So we definitely need more data for the Insider Threat Framework Initiative. So you could feel free to talk to me about that as well. And I think that that's going to be the big momentum for the community, like the signatures. When we did malware, there's all sorts of places where we have to share data to make progress.
Sure.
And that initiative is it. Insider Protect is more about your program, right? It's not just the indicators in your program, but the overall structure and governance. So what we're finding, a lot of even tool solutions are finding that people are buying solutions, and a leader saying, stand up a program, but they're not taking into account there's a lot of pieces to be in a program that's enterprise. Poor insider threat leaders have this mandate that's enterprise-wide without the access and authorities to be enterprise-wide. So it's a lot of relationship building.
Sure.
And we've seen a lot of things that work, and we've seen a lot of things that don't. And so Insider Protecting now gives us the ability, because we're not for profit, and so it's been a little challenging to actually work with your program and help you avoid the pitfalls that past programs have, so that you're not restarting programs over. So Insider Protect is a great opportunity to leverage kind of the leading practices and sustaining a good insider risk program, helping you get buy-in from HR, compliance, ethics, and legal. And we have a lot of success on how you engage with these groups, how you present what you're doing, how you present what you're not doing. And so Insider Protect gives us the ability to do that. So please, if we can be of value, that's what we're here to do. But the framework is all about data. So we're really looking forward to more folks sharing their organizational data so that we can get you a framework that gives you more to plan for. Unfortunately, MITRE ATT&CK is just cyber and it's just APTs. And so we need that data for insider threat, actual with insider threat data, but it's more than cyber, as all of you have figured out. So we'll also be looking at all that contextual data in these cases and finding some patterns, as we've been talking about.
So the Insider R Protect, it's limited to the Five Eyes, or is it open to the world?
Right now, the Insider Protect is it's officially limited to the Five Eyes. I think it depends on what other countries. So we could definitely talk about that. So it's for sure to the Five Eyes. I think there are other countries that are not Five Eyes that we would be able to partner with on that as well.
So if somebody's interested, they should just reach out to your organization through the link that we're going to provide below. But you get it sounds like I will get out of it as much as I put into it, like so many other things that we invest in. Or is it, I don't have a program. I am trying to set up a program and I want to learn from the experiences of others. And so you've been collecting data now for 16 years. Perhaps you can help me understand before I go and hit my head against this wall, because I don't know what I'm doing.
We can do both. So we are helping a lot of programs, brand new programs. We're helping people who were put in a program, leading a program that has to restart. And then we're helping others mature. So it really depends on where you're at, but we can do both, right? We can help you get started and get successfully and help you even get advocacy in your organization. But we also help mature programs add in new risk indicators, but also other innovative ways to mature programs that you have to be much further along to benefit from. So we have the ability to help with both, basically.
Well, I recently wrote a piece on the need for CISOs to mentor each other. I'm guessing that there's a need for HR risk management executives to mentor each other so that we're all not reinventing the wheel every time we want to roll down the road.
Exactly. And so we are able to cross-pollinate that, right? And as a not-for-profit, I think people are less concerned about IP and risk because we're not here to do that. So we're not building new solutions. We're trying to make all the solutions that are out there better, right? More efficient, better use of them. But with the program, it's really cross-pollinating those leading practices in a way that's harder for programs to do by themselves. And they just simply don't have the time, right? They have a larger mission than they have staffing for. I think many of you that are probably watching this would be happy to talk to 10 people that are just starting their program, but you're not provided the bandwidth to do that, right? So we're trying to also kind of fill that gap so that, yes, people are not starting from scratch, right? Benchmarking is a really important task, and we try to provide that.
There's this magic word in all of industry, no matter what sector you are, it's called resource. And time and place is the resource. We've got a few questions, so I'd like to jump into them. Let me go back down to Mr. Temple's question that came in early on. And it says, about 10 years ago, operations melded with security, militarily speaking. The J2 joined the J3. Is it time for HR to marry with security? Or the J1 or the J3? Also, and I'll stop there. He's got another part of the question, but let's go with that.
I'm not sure I would say that marrying them is essential. I will say, though, a number of industry programs, the insider threat program sits in HR, right? It is a workforce issue and a people part. I don't think putting HR in security is going to help. And I can't imagine that other aspects of security need to be tied to HR, but insider threat programs do. So I'm not sure it'd be as big a shift as you described, right, with the combining like the military does. But it is very viable that insider risk programs can be under an HR establishment as a workforce effort, right?
And
so
that's helped me with my own article on where your program resides may influence what it looks at. And the second part of Mr. Temple's question, which I'll paraphrase, talks about least privileged access, meaning just because somebody has a security clearance or is an executive of a company doesn't mean they should have carte blanche to everything that's classified at that level. So within our insider risk management program, I would think that there is space in there to talk about the behavior of wanting to know that which you don't need to know. That takes a lot of self-will, in my view. And I have to admit, I was indoctrinated at age 19 at the CIA on the need to know. And okay, so I grew up with this, but not everyone does. So how would you answer that? How do we make sure that folks understand this need to know, and that just because you have a clearance or you have that executive level, you don't need to have access to everything?
I think people really struggle with the need to know balancing with the need to share. So I think in the government and clearance world, September 11th will always mark what they saw as an imbalance, right? But hindsight is 2020. So it's always going to have that challenge of making sure we share enough so that we can be effective. But I think individually, you can also still have that need to know culture where it's comfortable for me to ask you, why do you need to know that, right? Is that something that's, add value? Is that part of your role, right? Is that what you do? But people want to be helpful. And so a lot of times, and they don't want to question others. Same with like piggybacking with your badge, right? People don't want to stop someone and say, no, you got to let the door close, right? And badge in yourself. So we need to create an environment though, where that's the norm. And that actually, I find, starts if senior leaders do it. Right? If people that are at senior levels allow you to question, do you need that information, and do that, and people see it, it gets easier. But need to know doesn't mean silos. And if we over silo, then we have other risks that have had big impacts as well. So it's very hard to balance, and it's not up to the insider risk program usually. There's a lot of identity access management.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of tools involved, and the anomalies within the tool set allow you to say, do I open an investigation? Do I not open an investigation? Do I have enough ancillary data? Because you and I love data. And say, yeah, there is enough. Let's take a closer look. Let's have that conversation. Having the conversation is 90% of the show, because, why are you accessing 20,000 databases? And when you call the supervisor and says, Joe here is accessing 20,000 databases last night. What's going on? Oh, I asked him to go scrape them. Okay, well, let us know next time, right? That's an IT discussion, as opposed to we've got a big risk here.
But it's due diligence to go ask, right? There isn't a reason that you shouldn't be asking, why someone did something that was surprising, right? Or unexpected or outside of their seeming lane, and whether there's a legitimate reason for that. I think we have still a bigger problem with people retaining access to things that they don't need access to anymore. And insider risk programs have a hard time. They're affected by that risk, but they don't control those solutions. And so they're often in a really awkward place trying to push, access removal, right? Access changing. And it doesn't happen as efficiently as it should.
There should be a big red button when somebody leaves, kill the access. I have a vignette. Just a couple months ago, I received an email from someone I did some work with that I had access to their network. And I got an email saying, we're removing your access. I mean, it was like 10 years ago. And I'm going, oh, so I had this access all along, boom. I didn't verify they removed me, but nor did I try to go in and see if they hadn't. But by golly, you would think there would be a checklist there. And that's my segue to Joshua Sinai's question. Have you developed a template for suspicious behaviors along a timeline that indicates heightened concern? If so, can you share it?
We actually just finished some analysis of really rich data looking for sequences of behaviors, and they were not there. So we actually had the right kind of data, right? We have the known bad. We can go back and look at their data. We organized it by ordering, of course, and there just weren't significant. There were a few, and we will share those out. But sequence of behavior, that kill chain kind of mentality, is not going to be the one of the key wins in this area. I think we can think about, though, that especially with information like leaking and things, people search, people collect, and then people move and remove. So I do think we can think of those as sequences that have to happen where we can have risk factors. But what we didn't find was someone who did A and then X and then Y in that order was more likely to be identified, right, as the insiders that were in that actual data. There was actual insider data. And so we're going to keep looking for those sequences, but so far they haven't proved as valuable as sets of behavior. So not in order, but when people do these 5 things, right, in a given period of time, like a given day or a given week, in a short period of time, they are demonstrating risky behavior similar to known bad. So we have some of those clusters, and we're happy if you are the appropriate insider risk program, but those obviously are very sensitive. So we are working more on those.
Sure.
But the exact order,
for
I think
example, I have found personal experience that if somebody steals stuff regularly, then they probably are also doing other stuff in their life that might be socially unacceptable. Unless you live in the group of Fagin in Oliver Twist, right? In which case you hone those skills. We have had a great number of comments from Stacy Champagne, and one that I wanted to pull out was that the difference between internal and external threat actors. My talking with a lot of CSOs, my talking with a lot of CISOs, my talking with a lot of CEOs, they are all focused looking out. I'm going to keep the nation state away. I'm going to keep my competitors away. I am going to keep the criminals away. And in my conversations, given my background, I've always said I've never met a technology that slowed me down. And because I'm a people person. So you have internal and external. Like to comment on that and as a closeout?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. It's right that CISOs are focusing. The APT is powerful, right? And they have different patterns and indicators, and they do a significant amount of damage. So I would never discourage that external look. What I would encourage as well, though, is the better you get at keeping the external out, the more likely they're going to engage with someone inside. Yes. They're going to recruit or partner, not just the foreign adversaries, but the criminal networks, as was mentioned as well, the competitors. So don't ever forget that the better we get at keeping them out of, at the border, that they're going to have to find alternative ways. And we talk about this a lot, even with insiders, right? How they take pictures or how do they get the information out? They don't use technology. So if we lock it down, they're going to print it and stick it in their pant leg. They're going to go back to non-tech solutions. So always remember that. But you're correct. There's kind of an overweight on APTs. And I think most organizations just don't see the risk until it happens to them. Hopefully they'll get smarter than that and realize that you need to be doing both. But it's different teams. Like if one team could do both, which we tried long ago with SOX, to be very honest, it's a different mindset. It's a different thinking. And for some reason, we can't get it all in one kind of bridged place.
Sure.
But they need to be doing both. But I would never discourage that APTs are not important.
Oh, no.
It's a higher frequency.
Indeed, there's enough evidence of how competitors go about recruiting their competitors' employees. And it's everything from cold calls to putting up hoardings outside their main gate saying, come work with us and we'll triple your salary. And then when you get into the interview and you need to bring your code book with you, and I use the code book analogy because coders and in the espionage world, we have cryptography. So bring your stuff with you is how you get that triple salary. On the other hand, nation states just belly up next to you. They use third parties. They use what you give them. We talked about social networks, about monitoring what people say about it, but your adversaries, perhaps not yours, but perhaps your clients, if you're in the defense world or intel world, your clients' adversaries are looking for you to engage in what we euphemistically call TMI, and providing too much information to show the world what you do, that you give them an entree to at least engage you. And, the Department of Justice has chock-a-block full of cases where people are double dipping, et cetera, because a certain nation state saw that people had a need or a want or an itch that wasn't being scratched. All of this, I think, is observable because nobody just, other than the cold call, nobody just shows up one day.
Correct. So we need to be, documenting those behaviors and looking. But, what we don't see actually, which I don't see we don't see a lot of partnerships internally, right? I get asked that a lot about like small groups within an organization, right? Partners. And even through the espionage, the ones that were partnered were with family,
Sure.
right? Spouses or, siblings or their children, And I think that's because that's a really big risk, right? You're empowering someone that can put you in prison if they change their mind. I think partnering with a criminal, you know what you're getting into, and you know that they're incentivized to not get caught. I think people don't partner with their coworkers and colleagues because the risk is higher that coworker or colleague will change their minds, right?
Sure.
Their career is not being a criminal or being a foreign adversary. Sure. So as far as that, I see a lot more teaming happening outside to inside than I would ever expect to see actually inside.
Sure.
Another
John Walker case is the example of using family and friends. The Nicholson case from the CIA, he recruited his son to contact the Russians from inside prison. So yeah, that was they're there. People will leverage family. They'll leverage whatever they have, but they've already made the decision to break trust. So perhaps our behavioral analysis will allow us to get to folks before they're in the position to be asked to break trust. I think that is the soup and nuts of what you've been sharing today.
Correct. That these are good people making bad choices, and we're looking for the behaviors that show that they're either open, right? Like they're putting out TMI and showing signs that it's going to be easy to recruit them, or they're already doing activities behaviors that demonstrate that they have greater potential, right, to do something that's not going to be good for your organization. And we have the opportunity to mitigate that. And that should be our goal, right? It's not to catch people. It's to help our employees that all get hit by life and help them weather through that and have the organization be something that they become more loyal to, right? Because you stuck with them. Those are the friends that we do. That's how we think about our friends, right? The ones that stick through when we're not as happy or not as positive or not as available. It's really the same in an organization that you tolerate, you recognize, you help, you support, and you give people a bandwidth to get through it. That you'll be rewarded for that, essentially, in this sense.
You are.
That if someone tries to recruit them, they're going to say no. I'm not interested.
If you invested so much to bring them in the door, why aren't you investing to keep them in? And when it's time for them to graduate and leave to their next challenge, facilitate it going out the door in a structured manner to include exit interviews so that you have more data.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
This has been fantastic. Links from today's discussion are in the comments section below. I've seen them scroll through. Thank you, Dr. Deanna Caputo of MITRE, and thank all of you for these conversations from the inside. Now go and have your own conversations.